Hey, Karina. Hello, everybody. For those of you who have just joined, I am going to wait a couple more minutes before we get started at 2 o'clock Barcelona time. I'm just going to stand by here. I'm just standing by for Karina to let me know when to start and when to begin. If I don't hear from her, I'm just going to begin right at 2 o'clock Barcelona time. If you guys wouldn't mind just confirming, for those of you who have already logged in, if you wouldn't mind just confirming in the chat box that you can see me fine and that you can hear me fine. That would be helpful to me. Okay. Can people confirm that you can see me and hear me now? We are just getting set up here. We are just about to begin. Roger, thanks for letting me know you can see me. Giona, are you able to see me again? Seems like it is working. Thank you guys for joining. So Karina and the careers team have organized this session today for you. And this is a session on how to deliver your elevator pitch. Karina, I know you're standing by here also. Is there anything that you wanted to say at the beginning? If not, I will go ahead and just get started. I'm going to just give everybody about 30 more seconds to get settled in here. I'm also going to just give Karina an opportunity if she wants to say anything to kick things off. Otherwise, I will begin in about 30 seconds, and I've got you until 3 o'clock p.m. So we'll start in just a moment. Thank you for your patience. All right. So thank you guys for coming today. Hola, and I hope you are all doing well wherever you are calling in from. I am really excited today to host this session for you on how to deliver your elevator pitch. I understand everyone here is an ESADE MSc student. I understand you're also from different programs, and just want to say thank you up front for joining me today. I am going to go ahead and jump into the content because we have so much to cover in the next 60 minutes. I have you until 3 o'clock Barcelona time today. I will walk you through the full agenda in a moment. I'm also going to explain my background and introduce myself more fully in a moment. But I just want to start off right away by sharing this stat with you, which is that employers rank first impressions as the second most important hiring factor when considering a candidate. And that comes before professional qualifications. And it is one of the most important things to consider when you're trying to land a job. And most employment decisions are actually made in the first 6.5 minutes. So this is some data coming out of Monster. They did some surveying of hiring managers, and they found out that most of these employment decisions are made very quickly. a lot. I know it can be tempting to open up another document and multitask, but I would really encourage you to, sorry guys, I think somebody muted me. Can you guys hear me again? All right, can you guys hear me okay? Or has somebody muted me? Are you guys able to hear me again? Can you guys hear me, or are you guys not hearing me anymore? No, you guys hear me? I did not mute myself. So are you guys able to hear me again? I think I may have been muted by maybe one of the hosts here. So, okay, it looks like everybody can hear me again. The irony is I was just telling you guys to mute your mics. I think it's possible that that somebody on the Asade side muted me. So they took my advice seriously there. Anyway, I just wanted to remind you to mute your mics, okay, not my mic, but mute your mics, and also to close your other applications. I am not actually, there's a whole tech team here, so they are also controlling my microphone here. So 3 things we're going to talk about today. All right, so first of all, I want to take you through 3 very common situations that you're going to face during your job recruitment process. Number 1 is, what's your background? Number 2, what are you looking for? And number 3, can you tell me about yourself? And specifically, I want to walk you through the importance of networking, share a response framework for you on how you can respond to this question, what's your background? And give you a couple examples of how this sounds in 30 seconds or less. The next thing I want to talk to you about is recruitment and the art of recruitment, but also understanding how to prepare for your recruitment process, your pitch strategy, and a framework to help you walk through this question of what are you looking for in 30 seconds or less. And finally, some examples of how you can respond to this question that is so important when you're working with hiring managers and recruiters. And then finally, I want to walk you through the ever important question of, can you tell me about yourself? And in the chat box, you guys can let me know, have you ever gotten that question in an interview? Can you tell me about yourself? I can see some people are saying yes. So we are going to talk about why interviews matter so much, the qualities of good interviewers, a response strategy, a framework of how to answer this question effectively in 2 to 3 minutes. And finally, if there's time, I'm going to give you an example of how this response sounds from start to finish, so you can hear how an effective response sounds in the context of an interview. And we're going to time me, and you're going to get to see me as a guinea pig here. By the end of today, what I hope you're going to do is you're going to be able to be more memorable when you're networking. You're going to be able to stand out when you're job hunting. And most importantly, you're going to be able to impress hiring managers during the interview, because we're going to cover that question of tell me about yourself, which is oftentimes the very first question that you get. And I can see people like Alejandro, Edward, Viknesh are saying, yeah, all the time you get that question in your interviews that you've had in the past. Okay, a little bit about myself, because you're probably wondering a little bit about who is this guy who Asade brought in to speak with you about this particular topic. My name is Joseph Liu. I'm a personal branding and career change consultant, and I actually spent the majority of my career working in brand marketing. I spent 10 years working in corporate brand marketing, then I worked in household goods brand marketing, and I also worked in luxury desserts brand marketing in the UK. I'm originally from the United States, but I'm now based just outside of London in the UK. My focus is on helping people bravely relaunch their careers. And my work falls into 3 areas. I'm a speaker, workshop, and webinar host. I do some speaking at a variety of business schools, including Asade, a variety of other business schools in Europe, and a variety of other conferences, including TEDx, Marketing Week Live, and The Guardian, focused primarily on career change and personal branding topics. I'm also a career advisor, and I do both one-on-one coaching and some writing as a contributing writer for publications including Forbes and Fast Company. And I'm also a podcast host. I host a podcast called Career Relaunch. I've actually featured people from Barcelona on my show, and the show is broadcast there in Spain. And I interview people who have made major career changes. So feel free to check that out if you want to. In terms of my education, I studied at Northwestern University. I did my MBA at the University of Michigan, Ross School of Business. I actually did a stint at Asade during my MBA. I spent a semester at Asade at the other campus in central Barcelona. So spent several months at Asade, have very fond memories of Asade, and love doing these sessions for you guys. And I'm also an associate certified coach. Okay. Before we dive into the 3 scenarios, I just want to walk you through a couple key principles to keep in mind when you're thinking about how to deliver an effective elevator pitch for yourself. First of all, let's talk about some branding principles. There's 3 S's for creating a strong personal brand. You got to be selective, you got to be specific, and you want to be suitable for your audience. And if you can do these 3 things when verbally communicating who you are and what you're about, it's going to help you come across as somebody who's more precise and help your personal brand stand out more effectively. When it comes to verbalizing your brand to others, there's 3 C's for an effective personal pitch. You want to be clear, you want to be concise, and you want to be consistent. Now, the only way that you can do these 3 things is if you've got some sort of a preparation strategy in place and you've rehearsed your responses. Otherwise, it is just very difficult to deliver a clear, concise, and consistent message about your personal brand. And that is why we're hosting this session for you today, because I want to help you get more clear, concise, and consistent with your responses. And we're going to start by talking about networking and this question of what's your background. So let's talk a little bit about networking, a response framework, and I'll give you a couple examples of how this sounds. Now, first of all, what do you think networking could involve? And you're welcome to put that into the comment box. I think there is a slight delay between when you put your comment in and when I see it. So, but you're welcome to put it into the comment box. What do you think networking could involve? And I welcome hearing your thoughts on that. I think, again, there is probably a slight delay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. I'll just give you 6 examples of ways I feel that you could network. Just as some examples, team meetings, in the classroom. Right now, I know you guys are doing a lot of virtual work, but hopefully eventually get back into the classroom. Job fairs. I know that ESADE is great at running some virtual job fairs for its students. Educational events like the one we're doing today. Informational interviews, which you can do in person or also online and virtually these days. Or alumni events, which I know ESADE also hosts some alumni events. And what these 6 situations have in common is that they are just more opportunities for you to develop and strengthen professional relationships. And that is why networking is so important. It doesn't always lead to a job opportunity, but it can oftentimes open up opportunities that weren't there for you before. So one common question you're going to get when networking with people is, what's your background? And the reason why people ask this question is because, number one, they want to understand who you are. And number 2, because they're oftentimes just trying to break the ice and warm up the conversation. Your objective as a candidate, and I'm going to walk you through each one of these. I'm going to walk you through the purpose, the objective, and how the question sounds for each of the 3 scenarios we're going to talk about today. Your objective as a candidate is to provide a snapshot of your background to lay the foundation for the rest of the conversation in 30 seconds or less. In 30 seconds or less. Here's how it could sound. So if you were working, what it might sound like is, so what do you do? Or it could say, what's your story? Or somebody might say, what did you do prior to enrolling in the your MSc program at ESADE? So what I would recommend you do is to follow a very basic 30-second response framework, which is your current personal situation, which could include where you're from and your current role or your program, and also some professional and or educational highlights, depending on whether you've worked before. And it could be the years, it could be experience summary, a scope of the companies you've worked for, and also your lead skills exercised. I understand many of you have not worked before, but I also understand some of you have had some internships in the past. And so here is, just to give you an example, I'll just give you a couple examples of how this can sound. Number 1, okay, I'm just making this up, okay, see if this applies to anybody here. I'm originally from China, and I'm currently doing a, let's say, management MSc at ESADE. Prior to this, I studied fill in the blank, whatever it was, let's say accounting at Beijing University, and did a product marketing internship at Tencent in Shenzhen, China. So that could be it, okay? That's just a very basic summary of your current personal situation and some educational highlights. Here's another one. Before coming to do my MSc at ESADE, I spent my life in Spain, where I studied psychology at fill-in-the-blank university. Prior to this, I spent 1 year working as a talent acquisition assistant at Nike, focused on interview coordination and candidate management. Okay, just pretty simple, nothing too fancy, but something you want to think about in advance so you don't have to come up with it on the spot. So my suggestion to you on this particular one is to script out your what's your background response. What's your background response? And for that, I did, in advance of this session, I did share a worksheet with the Asade team, which has hopefully gotten passed along to you. If not, you can go to this website here. It's just bit.ly/JLPBPW. I know it's kind of long, but that's the website you can go to, and you can just download that worksheet. But I'm gonna try to put it into the box here, but I don't know if I have access to be able to chat with everybody here, but I'm going to try to put it into the chat box. But I don't have total control over, as a speaker and not a host, I don't have total control over with the visibility of my comments to everybody. So apologies if you can't see that, but if you do go to that website there, you can download it. I also understand Asade has already shared this with all of you. But okay, sounds like Maud is confirming. Thank you, Maud, for confirming. You have received the worksheet, which is good. Okay, which is good. Okay, my suggestion, we're not going to be able to do this, and Karina has confirmed that she did send it out. We don't have time to do this at this particular moment, but my suggested homework for you is to go to this worksheet and just fill out this top section with your current personal situation and your professional highlights. I'm actually going to give you a moment right now to jot down any thoughts that you might have off the top of your head as it relates to this. So I'm just going to give you about a minute right now to capture your thoughts right now. If you don't have the worksheet, it's okay. You can just open up a Word document and again, just capture your thoughts on this one. I'm going to put the example back up on the screen here just as a template for you. And I'm just going to be quiet for a second. I'm going to let you jot down your thoughts on this for your unique personal situation. And thank you, Tomas, for confirming you've got the page and everything's working. That's good. Okay. Typically what we do is if we were in person, we might try to pair up with one another. My recommendation to you is to find somebody in your class who might be willing to sit down with you and hop on Zoom with you, or maybe eventually in person, and just practice this with one another. All right, practice this with one another. I also can see that some people have shared their thoughts about networking. Kobe is mentioning it's about expanding your connections. Ariana is saying it's about connecting with people you work with in an industry or company you're interested in. Ritwik is saying building a lasting impression with a potential recruiter partner, informal or formal connection. And then finally, James says networking is about building personal and professional friendships to exchange value. That's a great way of putting it, James. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move along here and start talking about either what we could maybe describe as on-campus recruitment, but more importantly, just recruitment in general. And this question of what are you looking for? Before we do that, does anybody have any questions about what we've just covered, the background question? I'll give you a second. It takes a few seconds for the comments to come through, but I'll just give you a moment. Anybody have any questions about the networking piece? Okay, I don't see any questions coming through in the comments, so I'm just going to move along here. Let's talk about 4 things: your preparation, your pitch strategy, a framework of how you can respond to this very popular question of what are you looking for, and some examples. So before we even get started in talking through the framework, let's talk about recruitment preparation. And again, we talked about the importance of networking. Professional relationships are another channel to uncover job leads. So whether you're crossing paths with somebody on a virtual job fair, or if you're on campus at Asade eventually and you attend a job fair, or you cross paths with somebody who works in a company that you're interested in, you want to make sure that you're prepared to come across as a well-informed candidate so that they can keep you in mind if and when a relevant opportunity comes up. So you want to make sure that before you even start going out and putting yourself in front of hiring managers or recruiters or anybody involved in job recruitment, you want to do your research. And trust me, as somebody who myself, I worked for 10 years in the corporate world, was very involved with hiring at every company I worked at. Hiring managers can tell. Hiring managers can tell. And Francesca, sorry guys, there's a couple questions coming in. There's a slight delay between when you put them in and when I can respond to them. Somebody is asking the question, what's the best way to network with somebody without making it seem too transactional? So today is not really a session about networking. It's more about the verbal pitch side of it. But Hugh, my overall feedback when it comes to networking is to think about it as a long-term strategy, not something that you do that is transactional, but as relationship building over the long haul. Francesca is asking, how can we respond to the goal for the next role without precluding too much? So I'm going to walk you through how to do that, Francesca, without coming across as being too narrow. But before we even do that, you want to prepare. And there's 4 things you want to prepare before you even get into any conversation with any sort of hiring manager about what you're looking for. And that is to understand what you're targeting. All right, so you're kind of reverse engineering this. So I would recommend that you know the brand, you know the company, you know the competitors, and you also know the customers. And if you can get in the habit of learning these things in advance, you're going to come across as a lot more polished and a lot more professional when you connect with these companies. The next thing you want to think about is how you research companies. And my suggestion is to actually go beyond the website and to look at things like annual reports, investor relations, quarterly earnings, and also just recent news. And if you can look at these things, it'll help you go beyond what most candidates do, which is just go to the website and kind of leave it at that. So my suggestion is to dig a little bit deeper and get to some useful information sources that may be less obvious to other people. Now, when it comes to your pitch strategy, this is a really critical point, what we're about to cover. Okay, super critical point. One of the most important things we're going to cover today, which is that employers fill roles, they do not help candidates find jobs. That's so important to understand. Now, what's the difference here? Some candidates believe that recruiters and headhunters and hiring managers are out there to help candidates find jobs. That's not how it works. Actually, recruiters are in the business of filling roles. There's a subtle difference here. This is so important to understand, because if you can understand the mindset of a recruiter, it helps you become a more effective candidate. Recruiters, just to give you some background on recruiters, are basically people who are hired to fill roles, and that's how they get paid. That's their job. And so they want to make sure they put the right candidate in front of hiring managers. So let me just give you an example of this, okay? What's really important is to come across as a focused candidate. And so let's just try a little thought exercise right now. I want you to think of a friend of yours and try to remember who their favorite musical artist is. Okay, so think about your friends and think about which friend out there is like a real big fan of a particular musical artist. Anybody want to share in the comment box? Not necessarily your friend's name, but which artist they love, which musical artist or which band they love. Anybody want to share that in the chat box? I will give you an example from my own life. So I got a great friend from college, and I'm going somewhere with this, by the way. Okay, he likes Radiohead. Okay, and whenever there is a Radiohead album that comes out, or if Radiohead's on tour, or if I hear that Radiohead's coming to his town, I always think of him. Okay, I always think of him. Now, that's because I know he's a huge Radiohead fan. We got a few people sharing some thoughts. Adele, Daft Punk, Avicii. Okay, great. Okay, so, and you guys can think of these people, right? So you can think of the friend that likes Eddie Vedder, and you can think of the friend that likes Hardwell, as Mateo said, or the friend who loves J. Cole, as Miguel shares. But what would happen if you had another friend out there? And that other friend liked Radiohead, But they also told you that they liked U2, and they like little Coldplay and Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran and Lady Gaga. And they also like a little bit of Gypsy Kings and the Despacito guys, and also Luis Fonsi. And yeah, they like a little opera. They like a little Placido Domingo. Oh, and by the way, they also like Psy. They like the Gangnam Style guy. And then Radiohead comes into town. Who am I thinking of first? Am I thinking about that first friend who's a huge fan of Radiohead? Or am I thinking about this other friend who kind of likes everybody? I think you know the answer to that. Of course, I'm thinking of the first friend. And that's because I know he's very targeted in who he likes. So this is a metaphor for thinking about how you position yourself. This is how marketing works. This is about top of mind awareness and people associating you with certain things. So I think of my friend, I think of Radiohead. This second friend, I don't think of this other friend. I don't associate any artist with him because he likes so many different types of artists. So what I want you to become is more targeted in your approach. And actually, the likelihood of you coming to mind for a relevant role is going to be highest if you're targeted. Now, no business school presentation would be complete without a 2x2 matrix. Okay, this is a very simple 2x2 matrix. I don't think you can see my mouse, but on the left-hand side here, you've got the y-axis, which is at the top, your target role, and at the bottom, another related role. Okay, so your target role is a 10 out of 10. The other related role is like, it's like a 7 out of 10. You'd be happy to take that role, but it's not your dream role. On the x-axis on the bottom, starting from the left, this is how clear you're being about what you want. On the left-hand side, you're very unclear. You're open to anything. Okay, you're flexible. On the right-hand side, you're very clear about what you want. Now, it turns out that the likelihood of you coming to mind for a relevant role is highest if you're targeted. And that is because hiring managers tend to prefer focused candidates. In the supply of talent that's out there, they tend to prefer focused candidates. And recruiters involved with recruitment are more comfortable putting a focused candidate in front of a hiring manager because it makes them look good. Because recruiters, the way recruiters work is recruiters are basically in the business of putting the right candidate in front of the right hiring manager. And so what you want to think about here is the importance of coming across as focused and specific. Now, you might be thinking, well, if I'm specific, what if this target role isn't available? Am I not precluding myself from another role? And I think this probably gets back to the question Francesca asked earlier about precluding yourself from other roles. Well, the reality is that even if you're very focused, you've got a reasonably high chance of being thought of for another related role. And that is because, imagine like if you said that you wanted to work at, let's say, you wanted to start have an entry-level management analyst role at a big 3 consulting firm, ideally McKinsey, based in Barcelona, focused on the pharmaceutical industry. And another role comes up, and it's in Barcelona, and it's at BCG, and it's an entry-level management analyst role. It's not focused on pharmaceuticals, but it's focused on biotechnology. Well, you probably have a reasonable chance of that recruiter or that hiring manager thinking of you and you coming to mind, and that's because you were very targeted with your initial comment of what you were looking for, okay? And Janice is asking, focused on the specific company or the industry? I'm gonna give you an example of how this sounds in a moment. I'm talking about being specific on everything, okay? I know that feels counterintuitive, but here is the issue. For those of you who are thinking, oh, but I don't wanna exclude myself from being considered for roles. I wanna be open. The problem with that approach, especially in an employer's marketplace, which is what we now find ourselves in during the pandemic. An employer's marketplace is basically where there are more candidates than there are roles available. There's a huge supply of talent right now, not enough roles available to those candidates. That makes it an employer's marketplace. It means employers are going to be more selective about who they choose to bring into their companies. And if you think that, okay, I'm going to be open, I'm going to be unclear about what I want, I'm going to be flexible about what I want, and you say that when somebody asks you, what are you looking for? The problem with that is you got a very low likelihood of coming to mind, and that's because you're competing with these people on the upper right-hand quadrant. There are enough focused candidates out there that I am always going to pick the focused candidate over the flexible, open candidate in most cases, because I want to bring somebody on board who I know that they know they want to work here. And that is how it works in an employer's marketplace. If you talk to recruiters right now, they are looking for candidates who have a genuine interest in working in their company. So the person who's considering this company out of the other 50 companies they're looking at, they're just not going to stand out as much. But then you think, well, what about on the bottom left here, Joseph? What about another role that might be open to me? I don't want to rule myself out for that. Problem is, you're competing against these people in the lower right-hand quadrant. Again, you've got enough focused candidates out there that as somebody who's unfocused, you're just likely not going to cut through. And this is such an important concept to understand. Everything in recruitment revolves around this. This is how marketing works. This is how positioning works. By being specific and narrow, you actually have a greater likelihood of standing out to somebody. All right, standing out to somebody. And another way of putting this is if you go to the store, okay, and you're a hiker, you're looking for a hiking shoe. If you're a cycler, you're looking for a cycling shoe. You are not going to buy an all-in-one cross trainer if you're a serious cycler. So if you try to be everything to everyone, you're going to stand out to no one. And so my suggestion when it comes to what you're looking for is to first of all understand what's behind this question. The purpose of this question is to understand your goals, yes, but it's also to judge how viable you are as a candidate, how comfortable I feel as a recruiting manager to put you in front of my manager in the company, or as a recruiter to put you in front of my client who I know is hiring for this role. I don't want to embarrass myself by putting somebody in front of my boss who I know doesn't really care that much about getting this job. I want to put somebody in front of the boss who is really, really focused. And then Tomas is saying, is it wrong to assume that being open to different positions shows adaptability on the candidate? No, it is. That is actually a very good assumption. Okay, being open is actually really important, and I'm going to describe to you how you can do that in a way that doesn't come across as being unfocused and unsure of what you want. So let's talk a little bit about the objective that you've got here. Your objective is to concisely communicate your interest in 30 seconds or less to maximize your chance of being considered if and when a relevant opportunity arises. Okay, if and when a relevant opportunity arises. So here's how the question could sound. What sort of role are you seeking now? So what's next for you? What would you like to do after you graduate from Asade? These are all just different versions of what are you looking for. My response framework I would recommend is to be very specific. Okay, so Janice, just going back to your earlier question, or it might be pronounced Giannis. You were asking, does it need to focus on a specific company or industry? Well, I would recommend, if you can, to focus in on all of it. So, and I understand some of you may not know what you want to do yet. I would encourage you to have a placeholder in place. That's going to be more effective than being open to everything. So I would lead by saying, I want to work in this industry with these key responsibilities in this sort of environment in this location. And these are just some examples, okay, moving from left to right. Giannis is also asking, don't you think hiring managers at McKinsey will know that you also apply to BCG or Bain? Yeah, they will know that. And I'm not saying that you got to say that I want to work at McKinsey, but I'm saying that you could say, you could be very specific about the industry without naming the company itself. Okay, so there's a slight difference here, and you're going to see in the examples, I'm not naming a company necessarily, unless you know you want to work for a company. I'm not necessarily naming a company. I'm describing the profile of the company so that when I say I want to work for a top 3 management consulting firm, that works for McKinsey, BCG, and or Bain. Okay. Now, if you were to just stop there, though, the problem with that, going back to the earlier comment that somebody mentioned, I think it was Francesca, about being too narrow. You don't want to be too narrow because you're going to come across as, first of all, being a little bit presumptuous. You're going to be a little bit, maybe, and you might come across as narrow-minded and also closed off. You don't also want to be ruled out for other opportunities that could be relevant and attractive to you. So I would encourage you to lead with focus, but to end with openness. And the way I would suggest you phrase this is, I'm looking for, and you name the industry, skills, culture, geography, but I'm also open to other opportunities that make use of my skills in, and you fill in the blank there. Okay, I'm looking for this, but I'm also open to this. And Alexandra is asking the question, how do I understand company culture? Networking is a great place. There's some great online resources. for that, including Glassdoor. You can go to company blogs. Fishbowl is a really cool app I've just discovered recently where you can talk to people directly in a company. Your alumni network, that's another great place to understand company culture. Informational interview is a good way. Here's some examples of how this sounds. Let me give you 3 examples. Number 1, let's say you're looking for an entry-level brand role. I am seeking a entry-level brand management position in the FMCG food industry focused on brand strategy, campaign planning, and new product launches at an entrepreneurial company, ideally based in London. But I'm also open to other strategic marketing positions that make use of my educational training in marketing and strategic management. Okay, so you're leading with focus, you're ending with openness. Let's try finance analyst. I know some of you are also working on your finance MSc. I'm seeking a entry-level finance analyst role focused on forecasting, budgeting, and reporting at an established global athletic apparel company based in Germany. All right, and some of you are probably already thinking Adidas. Notice I don't say Adidas here, okay? But I'm also open to other entry-level finance roles outside the apparel sector at a global company in Europe that makes use of my accountancy skills and fluency in English, Spanish, and German. All right? More. Consulting analyst. Here we go, okay? Looking for a consulting internship at a big 3 consulting firm focused on public sector projects, strategic analysis, and client management, ideally based in Paris. And you're thinking, wow, that's really narrow and specific. Yeah, but when I hear that, if I'm at BCG and I hear that, I'm thinking, wow, this candidate, she's really thought about this. She knows the kind of roles out there. She comes across as well-researched, well-prepared, and also very polished. Wow, I would love to have somebody like that. Wouldn't I love to have somebody like that in one of my meetings when I'm presenting to a client? Okay, so how you approach your job hunt, how you verbalize who you are says a lot about how you're going to behave as a professional. But I'm also open to entry-level consulting roles at an established consulting firm in Europe that makes use of my leadership experiences and fluency in French and English. And again, this openness piece, there's another subtle benefit of doing this, which is that you're communicating your skills, which conveys that you're not only looking to have a role, you're looking to make a contribution while you're in that role. And that's another reason why I like this framework of being open to other things that makes use of your skills in XYZ. It signals to them that you're actually looking to make a contribution. And too often candidates don't do that. So my suggested action and homework for you is to draft your target role statement. And that is just this second box on that worksheet. I'm going to give you a moment right now, actually, to capture your thoughts on this. And I'm just going to check in to see if anybody's got any questions. Then we're going to finish up by talking about the tell me about yourself question. Gauthier is asking, location, should it be precise as naming a city, or should we say the country where we want to work? Depends. It's really up to you. Okay, you could say London, you could say Barcelona, you could say Spain. If you have a city preference, I would name it. But if you have a country preference, I would name that. Some people have a continent preference. Some people say I want to work in Europe, but I'm also open to working in other parts of the world. But I would try to get as narrow as a country at least, if possible. Viknesh, you're asking, what if location isn't a constraint? Then don't mention it. Okay, then don't mention it. However, if you have a lead option, if you have an ideal, I would mention it, but just say that you're actually open to working in a variety of locations. Okay, so this framework I'm sharing with the industry, skills, culture, geography, these are just some examples of things you could mention. You don't have to mention all of them if you don't really care that much. So if you're location agnostic, maybe you don't mention it at all. Okay? All right, going to move us along here. Finish up by talking about interviews and why interviews matter, the characteristics of good interviewers, a response strategy, a framework for how you can answer this question in 3 minutes or less. And I'll give you an example of how this sounds from start to finish. I'm going to just demonstrate it myself by pretending that I'm going to be applying to a senior level marketing role. And I'll give you an example of how this sounds. Why do interviews matter so much? Okay, why do interviews still exist? Nobody likes interviews, right? They're stressful, they're time consuming. Just to give you a sense of what we're talking about, here's an example hiring funnel, moving from the upper left over to the right. We're starting with a CV review, cover letter, behavioral interview, case interview, cultural fit interview, assessment center, references, and also offer. And I know Asade does some work with you guys on some of these other aspects of the hiring funnel. We're going to focus on this yellowish box here, the behavioral interview. So, and yeah, just Francisca's asking this question, saying that location isn't important doesn't display the adaptability of the candidate. Well, no, I guess to clarify my point, I'm saying that you could say that you're open to working in other locations, and that's fine. I think that that's fine. That will demonstrate your flexibility. Okay, so the interview is the most influential lever of your hiring journey, and I can say that I can look you in the eye virtually and tell you that this is true both from personal experience as a candidate and also as a hiring manager myself. Here are just a few places I've interviewed, and I'm putting this up on the screen so you can get a sense of my experiences. I've interviewed at tech companies, at retail companies, and my experiences have been in the US and the UK, hardware companies, healthcare companies, educational companies in the past. I even worked in radio for a while. So these are examples of companies where I've interviewed where I either got to the final round or received an offer to work there. What I've found is that if you can do really well in the interview, you can very quickly close the gap between you and seemingly other more qualified candidates. So for example, when I was doing my MBA, PepsiCo was one of the companies I interviewed with. They only hire one candidate from each school they interview at. So they got one is in the US. So one candidate from Michigan, one from Kellogg, one from Harvard, one from Wharton, one from Stanford. So they only pick one from each school. Same thing at Clorox, which is where I used to work. Again, they only give one offer to somebody from Berkeley, one to USC, one to Harvard, Wharton, Kellogg, Stanford. And that's just Michigan. That's just the way they work. And so I got the offer to work at PepsiCo, and I also received an offer to join Clorox. And I don't attribute that to my background in marketing. I actually was one of the least experienced marketers in my class, but I invested a lot of time prepping for the interview and polishing my response to tell me about yourself. And I believe that that is what really separated me from the other candidates. When I interviewed candidates, I often asked this question first, tell me about yourself. And consistently, the candidates who answered this question well tended to be the candidates who made it through. Again, going back to that monster stat, most judgments are made within the first 6.5 minutes of an interview. That's when they're making their judgments. And half of that time is typically spent responding to this question. And that is why this question is so important. And so my point here to you is that you got to expect and also prepare for an interview so that you can stand out. The tell me about yourself question is one of the most important questions that you're going to get. And that is why we're dedicating our time to this one singular question. Good interviewers are tough. All right? Good interviewers are tough. They're tough for a few reasons. Okay, number one, I'm assuming that your interviewer has already reviewed your CV and already has a basic knowledge of your profile. I'm assuming they want additional meaningful information about who you are. I'm also assuming that they want to be able to differentiate you from other candidates who have and have not prepared. The only way that you can do this as an interviewer, and I speak from personal experience, when my interviews were not tough enough, I actually ended up making some hiring mistakes because my interviews weren't tough enough. And if you talk to any hiring manager who's made a hiring mistake like me, the next round, your interview is a lot tougher because you don't want to make that hiring mistake. You don't want to accidentally have a false positive. You'd rather there be a false negative. And what I mean by that is that as an interviewer, you would rather turn away a qualified candidate than accidentally hire somebody who may not be qualified. And that is because the costs to you and your career, if you bring somebody on board who doesn't belong in the organization, are quite significant. So once you get involved with hiring, you realize you don't want to make hiring mistakes. And that's why you make your interviews tough. Good interviewers aren't taking time out of their busy days either to have a casual chit chat with you. They want to rule you in or they want to rule you out to determine if you clear the hiring bar or not. And the only way you can do that is to be a tough interviewer. And that is because if you make your interview too easy, everybody clears that bar. It's like the Olympics. If you set the bar low on the ground, everybody, even if you're not an Olympian, you can just walk right over that bar. And that is what I would consider the 1-minute response to be. The average ESADE student could probably deliver a 1-minute response to the question, tell me about yourself, reasonably well. It may not be great, but I'd say everybody would approximate in the same level of quality. All right. 3-minute response, only the best clear that bar. And that is why in the Olympics, the high jumpers put the bar as high as possible because they know nobody else can do it. And they know that by putting it high and by choosing the hardest thing possible, that is how they're going to demonstrate that they're the best. So the 3-minute response strategy is effective, not only because it's comprehensive, but because it's actually harder to do. All right. So I'm recommending you take a strategy here that is harder, because that is the way that if you do it well, you can really blow people away. 3 to 4 minute responses tend to be the most effective. And that is because it allows you to provide additional information not already on your CV and cover letter, provides useful summary of how you view your key motivations, accomplishments, and transitions. And it also allows you to immediately, within that first 3 minutes, differentiate yourself as an outstanding candidate and set the tone for the rest of your interview, which will then likely be very positive. In case you don't believe me, okay, in case you feel like, wow, I just can't imagine that 3 minutes, I just feel so long to me. I can't imagine that that's effective. Well, I'll just share 4 industry perspectives, okay, for you. So I interviewed a few different people I know who are very involved with hiring. And here's just 4 examples. Word for word, what they told me when I asked them, how long of a response are you looking for when you ask a candidate the question, tell me about yourself? I didn't say, is 3 to 4 minutes okay? I actually said, how long do you expect the response to be? Here's an example. Senior brand director from ConAgra. I'm looking for a 4 to 5 minute response. Anything less would mean me having to ask way too many follow-up questions to fill in the blanks. I look for a 3 to 4 minute response to cover a summary of key accomplishments and relevant skills. I'm not looking for a line-by-line walkthrough, though. This is a managing director of Schwab, former Deloitte senior consultant. Management consultant from Strategy Ant, formerly Booz. I want a 3 to 5 minute response. It needs to be structured, relevant to the role, and highlight things both within and not within the CV. Okay, these are word for word. I did not make these up. These are word for word, exactly what they told me. Director of GE Capital Europe, now Wells Fargo. I'm expecting a brief overview of their background and why they see this role as the right career move. Should be 2 to 3 minutes and serve as the foundation for the rest of the interview. Now, this guy here, I probably most closely agree with him, but you can see that most of the response are covering anywhere between 2 and 4 minutes is where that hovers around. So 3 minutes is the maximum I would recommend. And for most of you, if you haven't worked before, or if you have a limited amount of work experience, this shouldn't be a problem for you. I would actually argue that even somebody with 10 years of work experience could do it in 3 minutes if they needed to. I'm actually going to demonstrate that today to you. This is not meant to be easy. All right? If this was easy, everyone would do it. Everyone would do it. I don't know if you guys can see the GIF. Can you guys see the GIF moving on the screen? I don't know if this is coming through on StreamYard, but there's basically, if you can't see it, okay, there's a guy trying to do a dive and he ends up doing a belly flop, or back flop in this case. This is Stephen Feck at the London 2012 Olympics. Okay, if you can't see the GIF, I'm sorry. I can't control how well things stream over the platforms here. But anyway, it's guy diving, it doesn't work out, all right? If you pull this off, you're going to truly impress. And again, if you can't see the video, there's a video of a woman, Ren Chen, who is a swimming world champion, and she's doing this incredible dive and nailing it as she enters the pool. But she picks this really, really difficult dive because she knows nobody else in the world can do it. So she's not picking the difficult dive because she wants to do it. She's doing it to prove that nobody else can do it except her. So if you can pull this off, you're going to really impress people. Here's how you do it. You've got to do these things. You've got to provide your response structure up front. And what I mean by that is you've got to give an agenda, a verbal agenda. If you don't do this, by around 1.5 minutes, people are going to wonder where you're going with it. Okay, so it could sound something like this. I'm just going to take a couple minutes. I'm going to walk you through my goals, accomplishments, and transitions along the way. I'm going to wrap up by explaining why I'm interested in this role. Okay, it could sound something like that. That's enough to give them a sense of where you're going with it. You got to confirm this works for them before you start. Okay, so the way this could sound is, okay, great. Well, what I'll do is I'm just going to walk you through my goals, accomplishments, and transitions along the way. I'm going to wrap up by explaining why I'm interested in this role. Does that work for you? They will very likely say, yeah, that sounds good. Go ahead. Okay. If they say, no, don't do that. If they say, no, actually, I prefer you try to keep it to 1 minute. Keep it to 1 minute. Okay. Do not tell them that Joseph said, oh, it's got to be 3 minutes. Okay. Do what they say. All right. They're in control of the interview. If they say keep it to a minute, that's actually pretty easy. You just combine the first two responses that we already went through, which is what's your background and what are you looking for? That'll fill a minute right there. You also need to monitor their engagement throughout. Okay, if you don't do this, if you feel like you're losing them, what you do is you stop, okay, and you just ask them, hey, is this the amount that you were looking for? Is this the kind of detail you're looking for in this answer? And they will tell you, okay? They will tell you to either wrap it up. They'll say, actually, if you could wrap it up. If they say that, wrap it up. But if they'll probably be taking notes like this, okay? And they'll be looking down. You'll think, are they still with me? And you just ask them, is this the amount of detail that you were looking at? I just want to pause for a second. They'll just probably look up from taking the notes and say, oh yeah, that's fine, keep going, it's fine. That's probably what they'll do, okay? But just, you gotta monitor where they're at, because if you lose them, you gotta wrap it up. And if you need to wrap it up, all you gotta do is just say, okay, well, what I'll do is I'll just wrap up by saying, well, I'm interested in this role. And then you answer, then you put in your response to that second question, which is, what are you looking for? That's how you wrap it up in probably 20 to 25 seconds. This isn't going to work if your interviewer is unprepared or inexperienced, if they're using the question as a casual icebreaker, or if they're unaware this question is so useful. I'm sorry if your interviewer is in this situation. I can't promise you that they are not going to be fall into one of these categories. If it happens, then I'm sorry, that's what happens, but that's what makes interviewing such a challenge. You never know who you're going to get on the other side. But if they are experienced, if they treat the question seriously, if they are aware that this is a really powerful, useful, and effective interview question, they'll treat it seriously and they'll expect a longer response. Here's the framework. First of all, the purpose of this question is threefold. Number one, I want to assess your communication skills. I want to understand if you can take a really broad question and apply some structure to it. Number two, I want to get your view on your career trajectory. And finally, this lays the foundation for follow-up questions. So if you say something interesting here, I might want to come back to it later in the interview. So you actually have an opportunity to shape the interview. Okay, your objective is to deliver a brief, high-level overview of your professional experiences and accomplishments. And I put 3 to 4 minutes here. Guys, for you, if you've worked for, let's say, less than 3 years, I would try to keep it to under 3 minutes. Here's how it could sound. Can you walk me through your CV? Can you give me a quick rundown on your history? Can you tell me a little bit about your background? Okay, now they're saying, can you tell me about your background? But this is in an interview setting. So if that's the case, now you flip over to interview mode, it's a slightly longer response. 1 to 2 minutes is not enough to cover this question, according to Mark Horstman and Mice Ozan, who host a great podcast called Career Tools. And they say you got to rehearse this again and again until you have it memorized. So now, am I saying you got to memorize it? No, but I would have it really well rehearsed. You really can't over-rehearse this. You're not going to come across as robotic. You're going to come across as really well prepared and really well rehearsed. Here's the response framework. Let's go through this one at a time. Okay, there's 4 parts to this. I know this seems like a lot, but we've actually already covered the intro and what's next, because that's pretty much the what's your background and what are you looking for section. Okay, but here's how it looks. You start off with some personal highlights and a synopsis of your professional history. Very similar to the first question, okay? For example, I spent the majority of my life in Paris, and I'm currently completing my marketing MSc at ESADE. I have a bachelor's degree in marketing and have since focused on developing my skills in new product development and innovation strategy. Okay, that's it. And then what you do, okay, so then what you do is you say something along the lines of, well, what I'll do is, so before you even get into this, what you start off by saying, I should probably include this, is you give them the verbal agenda. So you say, well, I'm going to take you through my goals, accomplishments, and transitions. I'll wrap up by explaining what brings me here today. Okay. So when I think about my personal history, then you go into it. Okay. So I forgot to mention that. You want to give that verbal agenda at first. Then you go into your professional, or in some cases, for some of you, your educational overview. All right. But I'm just going to put professional here just for the sake of illustration. Goal, role, and results. I wanted to develop my fundamentals in consumer innovation. So I completed an internship at L'Oreal, where I served as a marketing intern focused on new product development and packaging design. Try to include a result. Successfully managed a new packaging refresh on cosmetics line X that helped increase consumer trial by Y% during the launch. Now, I understand that some of you may not have had the goal clearly in mind before you took a role. I get that. Try to retrofit something here, okay? Because you want to make it at least seem like what you did in your career was intentional. Because goal, role, results. Goal, role, results. Doesn't have to necessarily be in that order. You could do role, goal, results if you want to. Transitions are the unsung hero of this response. It helps me understand your motivations, and it also helps me understand why you made the transitions you did. I would suggest you keep it simple and just say, I wanted to, so I wanted to diversify my skill set, so I took on a new role as assistant brand manager working on Brand Z. Okay. The next one is when you take a break from work. I wanted to broaden out my global business acumen, so I decided to enroll in the Sade's Management MSc program. That's it. Simple. Short, sweet, simple. You don't need to over-explain this unless they ask you. Finally, so you do a wrap-up, okay? And this is just recapping. You're doing a wrap-up, and then you're shifting into the response to that second question, which is what you're looking for. So as you can see, I've developed a strong foundation in marketing, brand communications, and consumer promotions. Now I'd like to move on to the next challenge, ideally in an entry-level brand management role in the beauty industry with marketing responsibilities that include campaign planning for new launches on a global brand based in London, which is what brings me here today. Notice I did not say, but I'm also open to other, okay? Because now I'm interviewing for a very specific role. So I'm chopping out that second half of that. And I'm saying, this is the role I want. All right? That is the framework. It is 2:54. There is time for me to walk you through an example here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 minutes here. I'm going to try to do this in 3 minutes. And if you would find this helpful, I'm just going to walk you through an example of how this sounds from start to finish. I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm going to pretend like I'm applying to a senior level brand management role in London. Okay, and I'm going to tick through, I'm going to try to flip through the different sections visually on the screen so you can see where I'm at. All right. I'm not reading this. Okay, there's nothing on my screen. Okay, I just have the PowerPoint up. That's all I'm doing. Okay, and you know that because I can't flip through the PowerPoint unless I'm on the PowerPoint. So I don't have notes on my screen here. Okay, this is something that I've got in my head. Here we go. So somebody asked me the question, what are you looking for? And I jump right in. And I start off by saying, first of all, okay, great. Well, what I'll do is I will just take a couple minutes. If it works for you, I'll walk you through my goals, accomplishments, and transitions along the way, and then wrap up by explaining what brings me here today and why I'm interested in this role. Does that work for you? Probably say yes. Okay, well, when I think about my professional history in brand management, it spans 3 chapters over 10 years. I spent 3 years working in corporate brand marketing, followed by 4 years in the household goods industry, and most recently 3 years in the luxury dessert segment in the UK. And I'll just give you a little bit more detail on each one of these now. So when I think about my first chapter of my career, my goal was to develop a broad business exposure in a startup environment. And I was fortunate enough to land at a company called Health Strategies Consultancy in Washington, D.C. I initially focused on health policy consulting, but got very interested in the corporate branding side of things. And one of the initiatives I got involved with was renaming the company from Health Strategies Consultancy to Avalere Health, which is now still the current name of the company, and resulted in the creation of a whole syndicated products division. I then wanted to broaden out my business acumen, so I pursued my MBA at the University of Michigan, where I focused on marketing and entrepreneurship. That was a great on-ramp to the next chapter of my career, where I focused on consumer packaged goods marketing in the household goods sector at the Clorox Company in the Bay Area. And my goal there was to focus on learning the nuts and bolts of marketing. And so I landed on the Glad brand, which is the company's largest brand. I marketed bin liners. And the thing I focused on there was brand analytics. Eventually moved on to the Liquid Plumber business, where I worked with the cross-functional team to launch the brand's first new product in 4 years, which delivered an incremental $7 million of net sales to the business. I then went through a bit of a personal transition. I wanted to be closer to my then girlfriend, now wife, who was based in London. I was in the Bay Area. I also wanted to shift out of household goods and move into the food industry because that was more of a personal interest of mine. Moved to the UK and was fortunate enough to land at the GU Puddings Company. My goal in this chapter of my career was to focus on campaign planning and management. I got a chance to do both. First at GU, helping to manage the company's first national ad campaign, which I coordinated across 4 different external agencies. Eventually moved on to Häagen-Dazs and the global team, where I was in charge of managing a global rollout of a holiday campaign across over 100 country managers. And that resulted in a record increase in earned media to the business. What I'd like to do now is to take these 10 years of experience managing and marketing brands, campaigns, managing people, managing new launches, and apply them to a senior level marketing role, ideally based in London, at a large established FMCG company in the luxury food industry with an interest in global expansion. This particular role ticked all those boxes, and that's what brings me here today. Okay, that is a 3-minute response right there. And that gives you a sense of how it sounds from start to finish. Now, I tripped up a little bit here and there. Okay, I forgot some things here and there, but overall, I had it in my head what I wanted to say. I'd rehearsed that, and that allows me to deliver that in that sort of a structured way. And that's how it sounds. Okay, and so and in the comment box, I'd welcome hearing from you how that sits with you, how that lands with you. Some people, hopefully, that's the first time you've heard something like that, and maybe it'll make you rethink how you approach this particular question. The way I do this, I rehearse this. Okay, you got to rehearse this. There's no way that you can do this unless you rehearse it. I actually have, if you look at my video, I've actually got, I'll hold it up to the screen. I've actually got a script here. I wasn't looking at this, okay? I was looking at my screen. This is down on my table. I rehearsed this before I hopped on to this particular webinar, okay? I'm not reading notes off my screen, and the reason why I'm not doing that, although you might be tempted to do that, is that people are gonna be able to tell that you're reading notes. If I'm doing this, okay, you can tell. Okay, even the most savvy person would know. You could make it really skinny and scroll through it. People will be able to tell that you're reading. It's very obvious. You can definitely tell when somebody's multitasking on a video conference call. And by the way, if you're in person, you don't have the option of looking at notes. So you want to rehearse this. Here's 3 ways I practice. At home, walking down the street. I know that sounds strange. If you can do this while you're walking down the street, and if you feel like that's weird, just put some earbuds in your ears, okay? Nobody's gonna think you're strange. People talk with earphones in their ears all the time now. It's a totally normal behavior now. Walking down the street, it's hard to do. If you can do that, it'll seem much easier to do when you're sitting down. Most importantly, on your way to the interview. On your way to the interview that day, I would suggest you practice it a couple times before you roll into the interview. All right, so your homework is to capture your career chapters and your goals. That's it. And Asade can be one of your chapters, okay? Or it could be one of your transitions. But before you start filling in all the blanks, just to start very high level, how do you want to describe your career chapters and how do you want to describe your transitions and your goals? Start there. And then after that, you can start filling in the blanks. Then you can rehearse it, okay? Then you can rehearse it. So this is a template that is included on that worksheet that Karina shared with you earlier. And so you can fill this out directly in the worksheet if you find it useful, or you can create a Word document outline as I've done here, whatever you prefer, whatever works for you. Okay? Just to summarize, because it's 3 o'clock now, we talked about how to answer the questions, what's your background, what are you looking for, and can you tell me about yourself? My suggestion for you is to follow a structure for your responses. Plan out your script, rehearse it a lot. I don't think you're going to sound overly rehearsed. I think you're going to sound polished, professional, and well prepared, and it's going to help you differentiate yourself from other candidates. With that, just as a reminder, 3 C's for an effective personal pitch. You want to be clear, concise, and consistent. And if you can keep this in mind, and if you can practice, I really think you can get this down. You're going to deliver outstanding responses to these questions you will get, and you're going to separate yourself from other candidates. All right, with that, a few pieces of admin here. And I don't know if you guys can see my chats in the chat box, but I'm going to put this into the chat box here, which is just a link to a survey that we would love for you to fill out. All right, you can just scan that QR code. It's really helpful to Asade and me when it comes to understanding how today went for you. First time that we're doing this virtually for you guys. So feel free to share your comments. I would welcome your candid feedback on how you found today. If you want to learn more about recruitment, I've got a podcast episode that where I interviewed a recruiter, and he shares a lot of useful insights. I'll put that into the chat box also. And that's at careerrelaunch.net/episode 27, or you can go to josephplew.com/episode 27, or you can just scan that QR code. And finally, if you want to get more personal branding resources, you can feel free to go to my website, and that is at josephplew.co/pb, and you can download another worksheet to help you define your personal brand and get other resources related to personal branding. So with that, I thank you very much for joining me today. I'm sorry we went a couple minutes over here. I hope you found that useful, and I wish you the best of luck with the rest of your time at Asade, and hopefully we'll get a chance to cross paths, hopefully in person someday in Barcelona. Thank you very much. I am actually still around here, guys. If anybody's got any final questions, feel free to let me know. I wanted to stop because I know some of you may have to go. But if you have any questions, I am still here. I'll turn my video back on. Okay. Any final questions? So somebody's asking, am I sharing the slides afterwards? So I don't typically share my slides, but that worksheet is basically a summary of everything we've just covered. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you. Karina, I don't know if there is a recording of this that people can rewatch. I had said that we could leave a recording up for up to 10 days, and so we might want to check with the Asade team to see if there's going to be a recording. I'm not actually sure. But yeah, thank you guys. Thank you. I see a lot of thank you. Thank you guys very much for coming today, and thanks for all your comments and your interaction. I would have loved to. Karina, do you happen to know if there's going to be a recording made available of this? I think I can't, to be honest, I can't recall. I recall maybe you asking me that, and I said that we could leave it up for 10 days. So you maybe check with the careers team. Sorry, guys, I should have checked that beforehand, and so I could have responded to that question. But I'll mention that to Karina, and maybe she can let you know. Any other questions? Anything else you guys want to know about? Questions for me at all? Otherwise, I'm going to let you go. Thank you for having me, and have a great rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.